Welcome to the Weekly Roar, coming live from the Lion's Den, helping new managers become great leaders and awesome bosses. And now, here's your host, Greg Storch.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Weekly Roar. Thanks for jumping into the Lion's Den today for another watch party. Today, I'm talking about another concept in the foundations of leadership. But before we get into today's topic, I'm Greg Storch, and my business is called Lion Enterprise, a leadership development and coaching business. I'm a certified professional coach and a certified leadership speaker and trainer. Hey, last week I continued my series called Follow the Leader, Concepts in the Foundations of Leadership, and I spoke about the crazy math of leadership and how we multiply when we add value and we divide when we subtract from others. So if you tuned into last week's broadcast, then you caught my story of Mikey and how by listening and learning about what he valued, I was able to add value to him. By the way, in that video, at the very end, I talked about my friend Melanie Ake, and I called her husband Joe Mike accidentally. I know, I'm flawed. I'm not perfect. My apologies to Melanie and her husband Joe. The story's still the same. The intent's still the same. I'm not even going to explain how I got it mixed up. Anyway, please accept my apologies, Melanie and Joe. Anyway, listen, if you didn't catch last week's video, go to my website at lion-enterprise.com, click at the top on the Lion's Pride Library, and you're going to get to all my videos right there in the Lion's Pride Library. Okay, you guys, let's go ahead and kick this thing off today. This concept today is called the triangle of trust. Yep, trust. It's the number one thing that we have to have as leaders, or we will never truly lead. Today, I'm going to talk about the importance of trust and the three legs of the trust triangle that will help you build it and keep it. And I want to share some real life examples that I have that relate exactly to what I'm talking about. Hey, just another reminder for you guys. I want you guys to be listening in each week and listen to these concepts and be grading yourself on the scale of 1 to 10 on how well you're doing in the area I'm talking about that week. At the end of this series on the concepts and the foundations of leadership, you'll be able to go back and see where you're not as strong. And once you identify those areas, then you can ask yourself, wherever you rated yourself, ask yourself, how do I get from where I am now to the next number? Say you rated yourself a 4 on trust. How do you get yourself to a 6? That's what you should be asking yourself. So anyway, I want you to rate yourself on the trust factor. Wherever you're leading, whether it's at work, literally leading teams, or maybe it's as a parent leading your children, or maybe you hold a leadership role somewhere in your community. Maybe you're on a board of directors. Maybe you're on the city council. Maybe you hold a position of leadership in the place where you worship. Wherever you fill a leadership role, I tell you these concepts that I'm sharing with you in the foundations of leadership apply regardless of what position you're filling, whether it's in your family, at church, in the community, or literally at work leading people. Earning trust and keeping that trust is probably one of the most difficult things that we face as leaders. It's also one of the most critical things we must do if we ever want to lead effectively. There's a saying in the sales world that people want to do business with people that they know, like, and trust. Well, the same thing is true when it comes to leadership. People are willing to follow a leader if they trust that person to lead them. If you can't gain the trust of others, then you're dead in the water before you even set sail. I mean, think about it. Put yourself in the shoes of someone who is following a leader. Would you follow that person if you didn't trust them? Of course not. When we ask for advice or we get help from someone, we usually take their advice or we usually accept their help if there's trust involved. I know it sounds really simple, but if you think about it more, how do you know people trust you? How do you gain the trust of someone? How do you keep someone's trust? Those are all really great questions that we as leaders should be asking ourselves. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about this trust triangle. Just like a triangle, trust has three sides to it when it comes to leadership. And the first side of this triangle that I want to talk to you about is competence. When it comes to leadership, there is no such thing as faking it until you make it. So one of the ways that we can earn the trust of our followers is through competence or proven performance. There's a lot that goes into this, but one of the things that it is not is perfection. We don't have to be perfect to earn the trust of others. I think the real key here is that we have to embrace our humanness, that there's no such thing as perfection, and that we are perfectly imperfect. We're flawed individuals, and that means we're going to make mistakes. Listen, I opened this video today admitting to a huge mistake I made on last week's video when I called my friend Melanie's husband by the wrong name. It's embarrassing, but you know what? I'm human and I make mistakes. But developing competence as a leader takes us knowing our limits and understanding that we're going to make mistakes. And when the time comes that we do, we have to be able to admit them. And that means letting your ego go. People are really looking for leaders that they can actually relate to. We can't relate to perfect. People don't want to see their leader as being this person they can't relate to because they're so perfect and they do everything and everything always works out for them. And look, they're at the top and they're making all this money and they have this beautiful spouse and all these great cars and homes all up. No. They want to know we're flawed. They need to see the flaws. Because when they see that you aren't perfect as the leader, you become more relatable to them. And therefore, they're able to give you trust. We can't be leaders who just always make mistakes over and over either, or we'll lose the trust of the people who are following us, right? It's not the fact that we make a mistake. It's how we acknowledge those mistakes and whether or not we learn lessons from them and grow as leaders as a result of it. Now, being consistent in this area, growing your skills to become highly competent, is how you build this side of the triangle. If you want to gain people's trust, you have to be consistently competent, or you're going to have a very hard time gaining trust. Now, I'm not saying that our followers have a zero defect mentality. Actually, just the opposite. I already talked about this. People are willing to forgive small missteps along the way, right? We're not perfect. We just can't continually make them, or the trust factor will begin to decline. So I want to tell you a little story about competence and trust. When I worked in DC, I was leading teams of highly technical people. I had system administrators, network engineers, coders, and cybersecurity professionals, just to name a few of them, who worked for me to deliver IT support services for the infrastructure of one of the major federal agencies. And it was my company's second largest contract. Now, my challenge was that I don't have a technical background. I didn't have the experience in all of these IT related disciplines. So how could I be competent in their eyes? I couldn't write a line of code or set up a firewall. I couldn't establish a new user profile or unlock someone's user account. These employees couldn't come to me as their leader and ask me how to do this or how to do that. Sounds like incompetence, really. So how was I able to build trust based on competence? The answer is that these guys didn't need me to be the technical expert. They didn't need me to write code. They didn't need me to set up user profiles or install new software. What they needed me to do as their leader was to manage the contract and lead the teams. And that's what I could do really well. Now, I didn't even start out as the program manager for that contract. I was really the second in command there. When I first started as the ops manager, it was during my time running the daily operations of that contract and the daily operations of the teams themselves where I established that competence in running the contract. See, what made me successful was that I was able to communicate technical issues and the needs of the IT engineers to the federal customer in words and in a way that they could understand what I was talking about. I was a translator. My team would talk to me in technical terms, and I could process those terms and spit them out into common language that anybody could understand. This is not an easy thing to do in the IT industry, but the managers who do have the ability to do that, they establish a high level of competence, and they establish that competence much quicker than those who cannot do it. So not only did my technical teams learn to trust me, I was also able to gain the trust of my leadership as well. I was able to display my competence in leadership to the point where I was promoted from the operations manager to the program manager within my first 8 months on the job. And within another year after that, I assumed the role of senior program manager with a larger scope of responsibility. I went from 156 contractors to over 300 contractors. So in my mind, competence is not just an ability to do something. It's the ability as a leader to know what your followers need from you and your ability to deliver it. When you can do that, your followers will see you as being competent and they will trust you to lead them. Okay, so we have competence. That's one leg. And then we have the second side of the triangle. And that side is connection, another C. Competence, connection. One of the other ways for leaders to build and sustain trust is by developing the ability to not only communicate well, but to connect with others. When a leader has the ability to connect with somebody, they will have the ability to gain the trust of their followers. Let's talk a little bit about connecting with others and why that's so important when it comes to developing trust as a leader. Connecting with people is a skill that can be developed, and it's really about our ability to listen effectively, truly hear what people are really saying, picking up on things that you can connect on, finding that common ground with people, and having the ability to just genuinely care about other people. Now, when we can think of others before ourselves, we have the ability to connect. And when we connect, we can gain people's trust. Why? Because when you show someone you care enough about them to listen and learn about them, they drop their guard down and allow trust to enter. Learning how to connect with others and not just communicate with them, talk at them, is an entire lesson in itself. And so I'm not going to dive real deep into that one right now, but let me share another story where my ability to connect with others helped me to gain trust. And maybe that will help explain this side of the triangle a little better. Okay, so one of my favorite tools that I use all the time to connect with others is finding common ground with them. When you're trying to find common ground with people, it requires that you listen to them and hear things that resonate with you. Now, you need to find something. Listen for that one thing that you can relate to or something that you have a similar experience with. I remember when I retired from the Navy and I took my first civilian job in 24 years. I was actually hired as a federal employee at a naval hospital back stateside. I retired out of Naples, Italy. And when we got back, we settled down in South Carolina. I was the director for civilian human resources, and I was overseeing the human resource management for 250 federal employees and another 250 contract workers. So 500 total people in this hospital. I didn't really have instant credibility when I arrived in South Carolina. Nobody knew me at all there except one or two people. Have you ever had that happen where you've maybe been hired as the new manager somewhere and you're coming in from somewhere else and nobody knows who you are or what you've done? Yeah, it can be really awkward. It's really hard to build trust with those you have to lead in those kind of situations. And that's exactly what was happening to me. Well, I was coming into a department with two other federal HR specialists, and there was also a representative from the local human resource office. Now, she didn't work for the hospital. She worked for what we called the HRO, the local HRO, but she was in our offices to help us because of the size of our employee population. And when I first arrived in the office, they were telling me about how everything ran before I got there. I think, they were trying to say, hey, just keep things going the way they are. We're perfectly happy there. And I was greeted by the entire team, all 3 people there, 4 people. But I noticed that Bill was a little standoffish during my first week there, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. Did I say something wrong? What was going on? I knew I was being sized up, but I just didn't know what was going on up here. I could tell that Bill was reluctant to just blindly trust me as the new director. He was also relatively new to that office, even though he had been there longer than I had. And I'm sure he was probably wondering what kind of changes were about to happen in the department. So after I settled into my new office, I made appointments with everybody, and I met with each one of the staff members one-on-one. Now, I saved Bill for last because I was actually, to be honest with you, a little worried about what I was going to get. I wasn't sure what was going to happen during my one-on-one with Bill. So when Bill finally came in the office, he shut the door, he took a seat in the chair in front of my desk, but he wasn't really making eye contact with me. So I got up from behind my desk and I came around and I sat down in the chair right next to him. And then I just said, "Hey, Bill, tell me about yourself." And of course, naturally, he started talking all about what he did in the department. He told me about what he did in his role in HR and how things were working in the office, how long he had been there, where he came from. It was the typical new employee, new boss chatter, right? Anyway, when he was done with all that stuff, I started asking more questions about his personal story. Where did he come from? Where did he live in South Carolina? What did he like to do on the weekends? I learned tons from Bill during that meeting by asking those questions and being genuinely inquisitive and wanting to know more about Bill as a person. But the biggest thing I learned from him was that not only was he also retired Navy, he was a retired dental technician. Bingo! That was it. That was our common ground. That's how we connected. I was a dental tech too. Now, I left that rating, that job, and got commissioned and moved on. But Bill climbed all the way to the very top of the enlisted ladder and retired as a Master Chief dental technician. So everybody knew him. And then we started connecting. Oh, do you know so-and-so? And do you know them? And do you know? And we found out that we had a ton of stuff in common ground, right? The weeks that followed showed a completely different Bill than the one that I first met. And by the way, Bill ended up teaching me how to shrimp with a cast net off the end of a dock. And I remember this one night he took me shrimping. We were casting these nets and we were pulling up tons. I didn't know what I was going to do with all these shrimp. We were filling buckets upon buckets upon buckets of shrimp. It was amazing. Anyway, my point, I digress. My point is that I was able to connect with Bill on common ground. And that's what led to my ability to gain his trust as the new leader of human resources. All right, so there's the second side of this triangle, right? So far we have competence and connection. So the third and the final leg of the trust triangle is character. Character, competence, connection, and now character. Our character and consistency in character is what makes trust possible. Remember when I said that in the business world, people engage with others based on who they know, like, and trust? Well, none of those are possible without developing the right character. You'll probably notice that I added a word in there, another C word, consistency. Why is that so important? Because people need to know what they're going to get from their leader day in and day out. As leaders, we can't be wishy-washy and developed character flaws based on what's going on in our lives or at work at a particular given moment. There needs to be consistency of character. When you walk in that door, people need to depend on knowing what they're going to get out of you. You know, when things are constantly changing all around a great leader, the one thing that needs to remain consistent is their character. Our followers have to know that they can expect a consistent person in character before they give their trust to that leader. Consistency in character means that we're living out our values every day, that we keep the promises that we make to other people, and that we uphold our integrity. When we do this day in and day out, that's when we become consistent in character. Having upstanding character, character that makes you honest and hardworking, is what helps people put their faith in you as their leader. They will trust you. They will trust that you have the potential to deliver the results you promise, because your character is someone who delivers on promises. Being talented isn't gonna be enough. If you're missing character, it's only a matter of time before your followers stop looking to you to lead. Now, one of the reasons why I was so successful in my IT career was undoubtedly my character. I was consistent with it, and my people always knew what they were going to get. It didn't matter if things were going poorly on the contract or if they were going well. The people I was leading got a leader who was consistently showing up the same way in every situation. There were plenty of days I arrived at the customer site in DC and there was something wrong. They weren't happy about something. Somebody did something wrong the night before, or the customer wasn't happy, or I got a phone call the night before from the customer saying, this got messed up, or they didn't do this, or they did do this and it was wrong. But I never changed my disposition. Disposition. That word reminds me of a proverb I once heard, and it says, like the golden ring in a swine's snout, so is a beautiful woman with a bad disposition. Now, I could rewrite that proverb to say, like the golden ring in a swine's snout, so is a leader with bad character. In other words, it's useless. A gold ring in a pig's nose is as useful as a leader with poor character. Okay. Let me summarize real quick for you. I believe that our ability to lead effectively has a lot to do with our ability to earn the trust of our followers. When people trust you, you can influence them. And if you can influence them, you can lead them. No leader can break the trust of their followers and continue to influence them. Trust is a requirement of leadership, and trust is made up of the 3 C's, the triangle of trust. Sounds like a superhero movie. Competence, connection, and character. And of all 3 sides, I submit to you that character is by far the most important of the 3. All right, you guys, I think that's going to do it for me this week. Please feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. Let me know what you think. And remember, I'm going to post the replay video in the Lion's Den in a new link where you can add more comments, because once I shut down the watch party, you'll no longer be able to actually watch the video itself. Thanks so much, you guys, for tuning in again this week for another weekly roar. I appreciate your support so much. I'm going to be back here next week, same place, same time. I always want to say same bat channel to speak about another concept in the foundations of leadership. All right, you guys, until we meet again next week, remember, be powerful, but stay poised, just like a lion. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for watching the Weekly Roar live event at lionenterprise.com. If you enjoyed this video, please tell others to join us each week here in the Lion's Den. Thanks again, and see you next week.